My parents forgot my birthday for years, but gave my sister a penthouse apartment as a graduation gift. When I said I graduated too, my dad chuckled, "In arts? That doesn't count." My sister mocked, "Maybe try graduating with dignity." I smiled, said nothing, and made a call that changed my future overnight. I grew up in a family where love wasn't really about words or actions. It was more about who could achieve what first. I have one sibling, Cecilia, and if I'm being honest, she was always the golden child. The one who excelled in everything she did. She was the type of person who would charm her way through life, always getting what she wanted with a smile and a bit of charm. She was smart, assertive, and always had her eye on the prize. Our parents, Robert and Clara, always saw her as the one with real potential. They'd often talk about how proud they were of her, about how successful she was going to be in life. They'd often say, "She's going places," as if I wasn't even in the room. I, on the other hand, never fit into their picture of success. I never had the same kind of ambition Cecilia had. I was more quiet, introspective, and, I guess you could say, a dreamer. I loved creating things, writing, painting, drawing. But these things didn't seem to matter to my parents. I think I was the daughter they couldn't understand. The one who chose a different path. Cecilia and I never really got along. She was always the perfect one. And I always felt like I had to do more to get their attention, but nothing I did ever seemed to be good enough. I graduated with a bachelor's in fine arts, then went on to get my master's in creative writing. I remember when I told my dad I was going back to school, he raised an eyebrow and said, "Are you sure you want to do that? You could do something more practical." But I didn't care. I wanted to follow my passion. The problem was, no one else cared. Not even my parents. When graduation day came, my parents didn't show up. They didn't even acknowledge it. I remember it was a quiet, almost empty feeling. I walked across the stage with only my friends and professors cheering me on. No applause from my parents. It wasn't the first time they had missed something important in my life. My birthdays had been forgotten for years, and any other milestone I reached was met with indifference. But I told myself it didn't matter. I didn't need them to validate me. That night, I came home exhausted from the ceremonies. It was a beautiful spring evening, but inside our home, the air was always thick with something unspoken. I walked through the door, expecting the same routine, my mom in the kitchen, my dad reading the paper. Cecilia, of course, was already home. She had her own celebration planned. "Hey," I said, trying to sound upbeat. "Graduated today." Cecilia didn't look up. She was scrolling through her phone, completely uninterested. "Oh, that's nice," she muttered. "I'm sure you're thrilled." I smiled tightly, though I could feel the familiar sting of being ignored. It wasn't new, and it didn't hurt like it used to. At least, that's what I told myself. We all sat down for dinner, a meal that felt like any other. The usual small talk, the usual distant glances. My mom was asking about Cecilia's graduation party, her next steps, as if the entire evening were only about her. That's when my dad dropped it. The explosives hell. "So, honey," he started, his voice casual, "we decided. We're going to get you that penthouse in the city, Cecilia. It'll be a great way to start your career. You've worked so hard." Cecilia's eyes lit up at the mention of the penthouse. "You really don't have to do that," she said, though her tone was thick with excitement. "I want to," my dad replied, leaning back in his chair with that familiar smugness. "You've earned it." It was a nice gesture. Of course, I didn't expect it, but it stung in a way I couldn't explain. For all the things I had done, for all the hard work I had put in, I was left out of the conversation. My achievement wasn't enough. I sat there quietly, pushing my food around on my plate. I could feel the resentment building up inside me, but I didn't say anything. What was the point? It was always like this. And then my dad looked at me, as if remembering I was still there. "Oh, right," he said, chuckling lightly. "Annabelle, you graduated too, right?" In arts? That doesn't really count, does it? I froze. Cecilia, who had been busy texting, looked up and smirked. Maybe try graduating with some dignity next time, Annabelle, she said, the words dripping with mockery. I smiled, but it was a smile that felt forced. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. I knew what they thought of me. I had known for years. I excused myself from the table, muttering something about being tired. I went up to my room, closed the door, and sat down on my bed, staring at my sketchbook. My heart was pounding, but I stayed calm. I had reached my limit. All these years of being dismissed, of being the second best child in their eyes, it was enough. I wasn't going to wait for them to see me anymore. I wasn't going to beg for their approval. I had something they could never take from me. My creativity. My voice. That's when I made the decision. I took my phone and dialed a number I had been avoiding for weeks. "Hello," came the voice on the other end. It was David, the editor I had met a few months earlier. He had shown interest in my writing, but I hadn't heard from him in a while. I had been working on my manuscript in secret. My passion had kept me going when nothing else did. "I'm ready," I said, my voice steady despite the tremble in my chest. "I finished the manuscript. I want to move forward." There was a pause. Then David's voice came through, warmer this time. "That's great, Annabelle. I'll send you the contract." And just like that, everything changed. The following months passed in a whirlwind. I revised my manuscript, went through the editing process, and signed the contract. My book was published. It was my story. My truth. And suddenly, people were listening. When the book was released, I did a few signings and interviews. The media started to take notice. I couldn't believe it. My dream, the thing I had worked so hard for, was happening. But even then, I didn't tell my parents. I didn't want them to steal my joy, not this time. I didn't need their validation. Then, one day, out of the blue, I received a call from Cecilia. "Annabelle," she said, sounding a little panicked, "can you help me with something? I've been trying to figure out some legal stuff for my next business venture, and I'm stuck. Do you know anyone?" I could hear the desperation in her voice. But I didn't rush to help. Instead, I decided to drop a little explosive of my own. "I'm sorry, Cecilia," I said casually, "I'm actually flying out to a book signing today. I'm pretty busy." There was a long silence on the other end. "Wait, a book signing?" she asked, her voice laced with disbelief. "For what?" "For my book," I said, the words hanging in the air like an unexpected punch. "The one I've been working on for the last few years. It's getting great reviews, and I'm heading to my next signing today." I could hear her trying to catch her breath. "Wait, what? You wrote a book?" I smiled, my chest swelling with pride. "Yes. And it's doing well." I didn't wait for her response. I hung up the phone and sat back, feeling a sense of peace that I had never felt before. For the first time in my life, I didn't need anyone's approval. I had achieved something on my own. The days that followed were a mix of euphoria and disbelief. My debut novel was gaining traction, and it seemed like every time I checked my social media, there was something new, a positive review, a book club discussion, an invitation to speak at an event. It was a whirlwind. I had spent so many years locked in my own world, constantly feeling overlooked, and now, the world was noticing me in a way I had always dreamed of. But as exciting as it was, there was still a lingering shadow. My parents had not reached out. I didn't expect them to, not at first. But as the weeks went by, a tiny part of me began to wonder. Would they even care? Would they even acknowledge that their quiet, overlooked daughter had done something remarkable? Or would they dismiss it like everything else I had ever done? I had no intention of waiting for their approval, but I couldn't help but feel the need for some form of recognition. Maybe it was human nature. Maybe it was because deep down, I still craved their love, even though I had stopped needing it to validate my worth. I kept busy. I threw myself into my work, diving deeper into the process of writing my next book, handling promotional events, and taking interviews. The more I was away from home, the easier it became to ignore the ache that had once been so sharp. But then, one day, a letter arrived. It was an envelope addressed in my mother's familiar handwriting. I hesitated before opening it, unsure of what it might say. My heart beat faster as I carefully slid my finger along the flap and unfolded the paper. It was short and to the point. "Dear Annabelle, I hope you are doing well. I wanted to reach out and let you know that your father and I have been following your success. It seems like your book is doing well. And we wanted to tell you, we are proud of you. We may not have expressed it the way we should have before, but we see now what you've accomplished. We would love to see you soon, to catch up. Let us know when you have time to visit. Love, Mom and Dad." I read the letter over and over, my emotions swirling. It wasn't a grand gesture. There were no apologies for all the years they had missed. No mention of my forgotten birthdays or the times I had been ignored. But there it was. They were acknowledging my success. They were proud of me. It wasn't the kind of apology I had imagined. It wasn't the heartfelt, tearful reunion I had once dreamed of. But it was something. And for the first time, I realized I didn't need more than that. This was enough. I folded the letter carefully and put it down on my desk. My phone buzzed on the counter, and I checked it. It was a message from Cecilia. "Congrats on the book, Annabelle. I'm really impressed. Maybe you can help me with something soon." I stared at the message for a while, unsure of how to respond. Her words were polite, but there was still an underlying tone, a hint of superiority, a quiet judgment hidden in the compliments. I didn't respond immediately. I didn't feel the need to. This was different. I had changed. I wasn't the same person who had waited for her approval or my parents' validation. Instead, I let the message sit. I turned my attention back to the manuscript for my second book, losing myself in the words that flowed more easily now, the ideas that felt like they were finally coming from a place of strength. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about proving anyone wrong. It was about me. I had finally figured that out. And that realization was more liberating than any success could ever be. Over the next few months, the calls from my parents became more frequent. They wanted to hear about the book, about my future plans, about how I was doing. Each time, I shared with them the details of my career, the exciting developments, and the new opportunities. But there was always something hollow in those conversations, something that felt unfinished. They would congratulate me, but it always felt like they were holding back. It was as if they didn't know how to navigate this new version of me. I decided I wasn't going to force them to understand. I had made peace with the fact that they might never fully grasp who I was or what I had accomplished. They might always see Cecilia as the real success story. But I had made my peace with that, too. Then, one day, I was invited to a high-profile literary event, one that would take me to New York City for a week of interviews, meetings, and readings. It was the kind of opportunity one had only dreamed about, the kind that put my name next to authors I had once idolized. I had been preparing for it for weeks, making sure every detail of my presentation was perfect, every speech ready, every book signing scheduled. The night before I was set to leave, my phone buzzed again. It was my father. "Annabelle," the message read. "We're proud of what you've done. Your mother and I have been thinking. It's time we made up for lost time. Let's celebrate your success. We'll be in New York next week. We'd love to take you out to dinner." I stared at the message for a long time, my thumb hovering over the keyboard. Part of me felt a strange sense of satisfaction. They were finally recognizing me. Finally making the effort. But another part of me felt distant. I wasn't sure if it was worth meeting them. I wasn't sure if I was ready to open that door again. Part of me wanted to say no, to let them figure it out for themselves, to let them see how much they had missed. But another part of me, the one that had longed for their approval all those years, was tempted. I didn't know what I would say, or how I would feel when I saw them. But one thing was clear, I had come a long way from that quiet, unnoticed girl who had once dreamed of making her mark in the world. Now, I had a voice. And no matter what happened next, I would never be silenced again. I spent the next few days pondering whether or not I should go. New York was a dream come true, and I had so much to focus on. I didn't really need their approval anymore, but there was still something inside me that wondered if, maybe, this was the time for a reconciliation. Or maybe, I thought, I could finally show them what they had missed all these years. The evening before my flight, I sat in my apartment, staring at the letter my mom had written. I thought about the years of being ignored, the birthdays forgotten, the endless dismissals of my dreams. But I also thought about what I had achieved, something that wasn't tied to their approval or their expectations. Something that belonged entirely to me. And then, I made my decision. The next morning, as I packed my bags for New York, I texted my father. "I'll meet you for dinner," I wrote. "But I'm not doing it for you. I'm doing it for me." I didn't get a response. The message was enough. There was no need to explain further. The dinner was set at one of the most exclusive restaurants in Manhattan, a place I would never have been able to afford if it weren't for my success. The location was stunning, a rooftop restaurant with sweeping views of the city skyline, the lights of the city twinkling beneath us. I arrived a little early, just to get my bearings, to let the excitement settle before the awkwardness of it all. When my parents arrived, they looked much older, much more fragile than I remembered. "Annabelle," my dad said, his voice warm but still distant, as though unsure how to approach me now. "It's good to see you." My mom was all smiles. "You look so good, honey. We've been following everything you've been doing. Your book, it's incredible. We're so proud." I nodded, but the words felt empty. I wasn't sure I could feel pride from them anymore, not after all the years of silence. It wasn't about the compliments. It was about the years that had passed when I was nothing to them. We sat down, ordered drinks, and small talk filled the air. They asked about my book, my career, my future plans. And each time I answered, there was a small twinge of satisfaction that they were listening, even if they had nothing left to offer except their words. My dad looked over at me after a few minutes, his face a little more serious than it had been earlier. "Annabelle," he started, his voice quieter, "I just want to say, we've been wrong. About everything. We didn't understand your path, and we didn't support you the way we should have. I'm sorry for that." I paused for a moment. There was a small part of me that wanted to feel relief, to finally hear those words. But the other part of me, the part that had learned to live without their validation, just felt indifferent. "I appreciate that, Dad," I said, keeping my tone steady. "But, honestly, I've been fine without it. You've spent my entire life telling me I wasn't good enough. Now, it's too late to expect me to forget that." They both looked surprised by my response, but I wasn't about to back down. The time for pretending to care had passed. I'd built a life on my own, without your help, and I'm happy with it. I've succeeded in ways you never thought I would. So, while I appreciate the apology, don't expect me to just forgive everything. There was an uncomfortable silence as my parents exchanged glances, their faces full of regret. But this wasn't about them anymore. It wasn't about making them feel better. It was about me standing my ground, about finally putting myself first. After a few more moments of awkward silence, my dad cleared his throat. I understand. I just want you to know that we're proud of you now. We see what you've done, and we see who you've become. That means a lot to us." I nodded, but my mind was already elsewhere. I wasn't here to get their approval anymore. I wasn't here to seek anything from them. I was here because I wanted them to see who I was now, not the daughter they had forgotten. The night ended with them giving me a small, carefully wrapped gift, a token of their appreciation. I didn't open it right there. I didn't need to. It felt hollow. Like they were trying to make up for lost time in a way that didn't quite hit the mark. I didn't want their gifts. I didn't want their validation. I had already moved on. But I had one last thing to do before I left. As I stood up to leave, I turned to my parents one last time. "I hope you enjoy the dinner," I said, with a final, polite smile. "But just know that I don't need you to make up for everything. I've already won. My book is a success. My life is a success. And I did it without you. So don't think that just because you're here now, you get to rewrite our story. The past is gone. I'm the one who's moved on." I stood there for a moment longer, watching their stunned faces, and then turned on my heel. I walked out of that restaurant, feeling lighter than I ever had before. I wasn't walking away from them. I was walking into my own future, one that I had built by my own hands. The next morning, I boarded my flight back to my apartment, already planning my next steps. The book had opened new doors for me, and I was already brainstorming ideas for the next one. But more than that, I was finally free. Free from the burden of needing my parents' approval. Free from the expectations of a family that had never truly seen me for who I was. And free from the idea that their love was something I needed to thrive. I had won, not because I had been cruel, not because I had exacted revenge in any dramatic way, but because I had moved forward. I had proven to myself that I was enough. I didn't need their penthouse apartment, their recognition, or their approval. I needed none of it. I had already created my own success, my own life, and that was worth more than anything they could ever give me.